Welcome to our first meeting of the new year of Strong Community Select, and may I begin by wishing everybody a very happy new year. I think if we could start for the benefit of the public that are watching online, if we could all introduce ourselves. So if we could start at the back with Councillor Eason and work down. Thank you.
Yeah, you got that right. Councillor Eason, Dewstor Ward, Caldecott.
Richard Roden, Dixon with Osburston Ward. Thank you.
Laura Jones, Wisham.
Morning everybody, Anne Webb, Tinton and St Arvans.
Good morning, Alan Davis, Green Lane, Caldecott.
Councillor Val Smith, Lambeth Ward.
Thank you. And if the
Dave Loader, Central Finance.
Jonathan Davis, Finance Manager, Central Finance.
Richard Jones, Policy and Performance Officer.
Roger Hoggins, Head of Operations.
Carl Tuig, Head of Waste and Street Services.
Paula Harris, Democratic Services.
Hazel Eilert, Scrutiny.
And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Jane Pratt and I represent Llanelli Ward. So thank you very much and welcome to members of the public. Thank you very much for attending today, Mr Sutherland. And can I ask if there's been any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. No apologies received this morning.
Any declarations of interest from members? So if we can move on to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 16th of November. And I'll take them on block. Are there any amendments either to do with accuracy or any other comments any members would like to make about the minutes?
Move, Chair.
Thank you. Are all in favour that it's an accurate record? So I thank you very much. So if we can look at the action list from the meeting last time. And the first point was Councillor Val Smith raised questions regarding the answers prepared by People's Services. Could we have an update on that?
Chair, we followed up the actions from the previous meeting. If anybody's got any comments to add, we can have a look at that when we start to look at the work programme and programming some future scrutiny.
If I can, Chairman, I think, Councillor Matt, I'm not feeling very grand. There were responses that were sent out by email, which I didn't feel was satisfactory because the meeting is open to the public. The public deserve to know if there are any responses. And there were numbers of responses that were sent out by email. So I can remember making that comment on.
So you'd like better clarification?
Clarification. If there are questions asked and we're going to receive responses, those should be there for the members of the public, if they're interested, to actually see what they were. Thanks.
Yes. Well, I think anyway. Yeah, thank you. And Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. We agree the minutes are correct, but going back to the minutes, there was an action on the minutes about funerals and burials. Now, I asked that it go to added to the work programme. Was that the work programme or would it be the action list? I'm not quite sure where it went to. And has it gone anywhere?
Thank you very much. That was my concern as well. And it certainly is something that needs to be added to the work programme when we get to that later on in the meeting.
Can I just as well, Chairman, because talking to you informally, I said, yeah, this was something that a long time ago I'd raised because I think it is a concern. And it's quite interesting. I said I'd do a bit of follow-up work. That this has actually been undertaken in Westminster. There is a concern there about the costs and the funerals. And there's a huge setup called Digitas who are saying we're going to go public. But it is an issue that needs looking at. And it's something that previously I had felt that the council could be constructively helpful to our residents about. So I have done a bit of homework on that. And I found it interesting that Westminster had actually embarked on some research and had got some reports. Be interesting to see those.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I mean, is this something that we should be setting up perhaps a subcommittee to look at this very issue and report to the committee? Is it something that we could look into as a committee?
Of course, Chair, you're welcome as a committee to look at what you'd like to look at, but I believe the latest position on this, Roger Hoggins sent an email to members asking members to speak to Deb Howells about what their concerns were, and actually some members of the committee said they couldn't recall the discussion and they didn't have any concerns. So that's where we are with that. If you have got concerns and you would like to table this, we need to know exactly what you want to look at so that we can bring the officer before you with the appropriate report.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, what came back to me via email from that officer was we weren't going to charge for children's burials or something like this. It was just a few facts. It wasn't the information that I was hoping we would get.
Well, thank you for those contributions, and I think this is a topic which is of a great worry to many of our residents, the paying for funerals and all the discussion around that. So I think rightly this is something that we need to add on to our work programme later on. So any other comments concerning and obviously we'll look at the work programme later on in the meeting. So if we can now move on to agenda item number 6, which is the performance report for Q2. And I think Richard Jones is... Oh, sorry. Well, I do apologise. Mr Sutherland, I do apologise to you. Thank you very much for coming, and I understand that you've got some questions that you'd like to put to the Stronger Communities.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. And first of all, a happy new year to all councillors and staff of Monmouthshire County Council from Lambaddock Community Council, and appreciation of what you do for us. Perhaps here endeth the good news. Firstly, Usk Hub, there are events happening this evening and next Monday. An email is received by our excellent clerk, Olivia Beaumont, on the 9th of January for an event on the 11th. We can help a bit with the promotion. There's some local authors attending the hub this evening, but I think we're entitled to a little more kind of notice of these events, and we can perhaps promote them more effectively at local level. So perhaps we could just ask for a little sharpening up of the promotion process for these events. That would be most helpful. Secondly, we're concerned locally, and I must declare an interest. I look out on the land opposite Usk Island car park. The enclosure there is rapidly filling up. Over Christmas, a mobile home has appeared, stood outside the enclosure for a few days and then was moved in. Secondly, a lorry has now arrived and is parked permanently within the enclosure. We've raised it with Monmouthshire County Council Planning Department, and no doubt they're on the case. There are some elderly residents adjacent to Mayfield, and they look out on the back of the enclosure. They are in their 80s, they have a range of health issues, and they are very concerned about what's happening there. We would draw that issue to the committee's attention and ask what progress or action you could take on our behalf, particularly in relation to those residents. It's beginning to look like something more than an enclosure, and we are concerned about whether planning legislation is not being complied with. The third of 4 points I want to make this morning is in relation to the major gas works that will go on in Usk High Street and the environs starting in February 2018. We're a couple of weeks away from that start date, if indeed it is the start date, but there's been very little consultation with us as a community council over the issue, and we ourselves are getting a lot of questions about the rerouting of lorries, the impact on local businesses, etc., etc. And while we are not Usk Town Council, we are getting a range of questions from residents who will be impacted by that work. We have no issue with the need to do the work, that's obvious, and many of us attended the very good presentation by the gas company when they were consulting with us on it. We wonder as well that the works are going to go on for a year, thereabouts. Is there the opportunity at the end of that year to consider things like shared space and have a consultation on it? As local residents, we will have been used to the upheaval in the High Street and the surrounding roads, and we wonder as a community council whether that doesn't give the county council an opportunity to work with us on something like shared space in line with the Hamilton Bailey recommendations that you may well have seen in 2017. Finally, you'll be pleased to know, I would like just to raise the issue once again of speeding through Lambaddock, and would ask the committee if they have any information that can help our residents with regard to that. We note with interest that the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit has been put in Usk High Street. We're delighted to see that, but it's interesting to us that that's been put in a month before the whole of the High Street is going to be kind of a no-go area because of the gas main works. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity of raising those questions with you, and I'd welcome a response on most of them, if not all of them. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland, for your valued questions. If I could ask Roger Hoggins to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In relation to Mr. Sutherland's first query, I recall Mr. Sutherland mentioned this at a previous meeting in relation to the old coal yard. You raised it with the planning authority, planning officers. I'll remind them that this matter is ongoing and ask them to offer you an update. The gas improvement work's been undertaken throughout Usk. It's not just in Bridge Street, it's in many other streets throughout Usk, and actually I believe comes through Lambaddock down the road as well. The utilities company which is undertaking the work have undertaken leaflet drops already, and a public consultation exercise has been undertaken at the Three Salmons, which many were invited to attend. I believe that allayed many fears which stretched from we're closing Usk for 3 months down to actually what is happening, and they are going to endeavour to minimise as far as possible the inconvenience upon residents and motorists, but obviously the closures for that period of time, so as they can undertake closures during that time, not the whole of the time. But that's where I believe that exercise has been useful. Nevertheless, if there is need for further works, there is a liaison officer with the utilities company, and I have that individual's details. I'll contact that individual and ask him to be in touch with the clerk of Lambaddock Community Council and probably us Town Council as well, to see what further information might assist in advising residents. The shared space, that would be ideal, wouldn't it, to just carry on straight through. I suspect it's going to be a much longer exercise, both in terms of what it might look like, the consultation which goes with that, and indeed, if it's going to happen, how is it going to be funded. It is a much a different type of exercise to the utilities work which has been undertaken. But I completely support the sentiment, why you got it dug up, why don't you do it at the same time? I can understand that. Unfortunately, it's unlikely to work like that. Nevertheless, that is work which will continue in consultation with us Town Council and Lambaddock Community Council, because it affects both sides, if indeed that scheme does go forward. I say if indeed, as I mentioned, it is around funding and it is around support from residents. What's it going to look like? What's the impact? So there's a huge number of matters to be taken into account about any development to alter the public highway and public open spaces within Usk. It sort of links really to the speeding issue, because Mr. Sutherland has been in previously seeking some support towards ensuring we bring in some traffic management measures on the Llanbadach side of the bridge. And the broader scheme which we talk about public open space, public realm, shared space, may well include a scheme which extends out into the Llanbadach Community Council, and they have been involved in those meetings which have taken place so far. That being said, because there's a long time on that, in any event, we are going to introduce vehicle-activated signs in Llanbadach, and those are scheduled to be installed during this financial year. So there is a much bigger scheme which may well bring in improvements in terms of motorist behaviour. That's a long time off. In the meantime, we will put in vehicle-activated signs too, and I'm sure members know what we're talking about. It's the signs which flash the speed limit to try and encourage drivers to drive more responsibly. So those are in throes of being installed and should be installed in this financial year. Thank you, Madam. Oh, the only final thing in terms of speeding, I don't know if, do you want to take the opportunity to talk more broadly on that, Hazel?
Thank you very much, Roger. I'll just ask Hazel to just update us on the speed situation.
Yes, members will be aware that before Christmas I sent you an email to keep you updated on where we are with the task group. I do understand members' frustration at not having met since sort of October time when we last met as a task and finish group, but I wanted to reassure members that that's not to say that that officers have not been meeting to discuss this issue. We've been meeting several times between that time to see what we can put together with partners. So on the 3rd of January this year, we met with the police, myself, officers, and we met with Go Safe, senior people at Go Safe, to have a very honest discussion about whether we could work in partnership on an actual process for dealing with road safety concerns, speed-related concerns, and that discussion was very positive. We've put together a sort of potential process that we could jointly deliver, multi-agency, so that's police, Go Safe and the council. And what we need to do now before we come back to members is we need to set up another meeting with more expert people from Go Safe and the police to look at whether to test this process and to look at whether it will actually work in reality. That is something that I'm not technically able to do. My knowledge and expertise is not in that area, but I will facilitate and coordinate that meeting. But we will have specific people from Highways, from the police and from Go Safe who are experts in that field to look at the draft process and to see whether it's workable, because each stage of the process requires partners to play a particular role, and quite a distinct role, which at the moment is very different. At the moment we're all playing quite similar roles, and obviously not to best effect. So this involves partners putting some sort of different focus on their actions and us having a coordinated approach. We are working on that, and the next meeting of these experts will help to draw out a process that we can then bring to you. But we don't think at this stage that it would be worthwhile in terms of your time us bringing something and nothing to you when we've not got something a little bit more concrete. When we have something to bring to members, which will hopefully be in the next couple of months, we will meet as a task group, and following that we will then hold what we agreed we would, a public workshop to discuss with the public whether they feel that process would work. But at this point in time we need to firm up what we've discussed with our partners on the 3rd of January to ensure that we've got the necessary buy-in from those agencies.
Thank you very much for that update, Hazel. First of all, from members, there are any members want to? Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, when I was canvassing for the election, this was one of the main concerns of residents, was speeding, not only generally, but within 20 mile an hour zones as well, because a lot of us, apply the rules when to ourselves, but a lot of people don't as well. And the potential is there, particularly because a lot of these 20-mile-an-hour zones are around schools, and therefore the potential for accidents there are much higher than anywhere else. I'm a little bit concerned about the timescales again. We really need to push on with this, because as a councillor, I need to report back to the residents in my ward about actually what we're doing about it. I said that I would take this up, which I have, and many other councillors have done exactly the same. And we really need to be in a position to say, well, yes, something positive is happening, and there is a timescale within which it will be implemented. And we come back, as we often do in council, I think, to doing things within a timely period. So I think we really need to keep that in mind. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I think that, Hazel, your points are very well made. And I totally agree with you that without exception, there's not a councillor here who this wasn't the main issue on the doorstep. And as you say, we have a responsibility to our residents to make sure that some action is being taken. But I know that the officers have been working extremely hard to try and sort this out and get all the partners on board. And, believe me, it's not through not trying. They've been working extremely hard to resolve this issue, and it isn't something that we're going to let the pressure off. We're going to keep the pressure on, and we will come back as soon as we can. If Mr. Sutherland, if you'd like to come back on that point.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll keep it very brief. Just 3 points of clarification. I'm assuming the financial year will end on 31st of March, so the VAS signs would be in before March 2018, which is excellent news. Thank you very much indeed for that. Just to underpin my earlier comments, all we're looking for on shared space, and I do share the concerns about the implications of it, as the Community Council do, we're merely seeking a consultation on that. That would be satisfactory to us. We appreciate there's going to be all sorts of views, and some of those views will not be totally positive, let's put it that way, I imagine, and that's right. And finally, I think my point about the Usk gas, the mains renewal, is also about if we now know where the lorries are being rerouted, it would be very helpful to have that information. What we feel we lack since the public consultation at the Three Salmons, it's just seemed to have gone into a void. And some of that very localised information about where the lorries will be going would be incredibly useful to us and would reassure our residents. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the opportunity of raising those questions with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Roger to come back in a moment. Can I just also mention, Mr. Sutherland, if you've got the time to pop down to planning when you leave and speak to Paula Clark or Helen Etherington regarding Usk Island and the other issues that you've raised today, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you. Roger, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, in relation to any public space, any alterations within the Llanbadarch Community Council and as Town Council, members can remain assured that there will have to be extensive consultation.
Can you put your mic on?
Oh, you have? Yeah.
Is it on?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Sorry?
Can you hear? Yeah, I can hear you. All right, sorry, Roger.
I won't show it. Yeah, they will. It's inevitable with the schemes such as what might be contemplated. There will be that consultation, so I can offer that assurance. I take the point about the lorries. It was a point I discussed when I actually went to the presentation at Three Salmons and how they're going to actually manage that during the time, because there will be times when it will be open for traffic to move through. There will be other times when they'll have traffic lights on there. There will be the odd occasion when they'll have for a short period of time, full closures. I'll take that point back to the liaison officer and ask them to provide more information about it. I think is the best way to do that, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Madam Chair, again. I appreciate the member of the public coming to address us on this speeding issue, because it is a matter across the county. Some of my residents won't come to County Hall. It's too far just about a question. But they do raise these same questions in the Cemetery Area Committee, which is very, very similar to the problems around Usk. And I think that Hazel has made a good point on where we're going to drive on this. But we do need to keep the area committees fully, particularly in your area as well, Llanelli Hill, to keep them fully informed of what we're doing here. Because speeding is an issue, heavy lorries is an issue, but we need to look at it in the round, and we need to have a solution, I think, for the whole of Monmouthshire, not the case for us, because I understand the problems, but we need to have a policy for the whole of Monmouthshire which we can apply without having to keep going back to area committees and things like that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Easton, and I agree, and I do note that there is an agendaed item about heavy lorries and passing through lanes, which is a particular problem everywhere, especially where in my ward, and I know that's is on the agenda. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
With the gasworks, could we please ask them to put up really prominent notice that extensive works are going to be undertaken starting, because it's going to hit a lot of people as a surprise. If you could put those notices up 4 or 5 weeks before it eventually registers with even me. That
Any other comments from members? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland, for your attendance today. So we'll now move on to performance report, which is agenda item 6, and I understand that that's going to be presented by Richard Jones.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So here to present performance report for performance up to Q2 of 2017-18. Select Committee will recall last time I was here, I presented the Council's performance framework to you, which translates how we deliver our purpose of building sustainable and resilient communities into action. And we discussed the important part of that framework being performance indicators we use to evaluate and track our progress. There are a variety of national and locally set performance indicators which services use, and today, particularly in Appendix 1, is one set of national indicators which are set by the Data Unit Wales and are used to benchmark council performance annually for public accountability. So the indicators in Appendix 1 are those which are particularly relevant to Strong Community Select Committee. So they include sickness, street cleanliness and fly tipping, road condition, food hygiene, waste and recycling, and also libraries. And the appendix there sets out the trend data, targets that have been set and performance against those targets at Q2, and also the benchmarking quartile from 2016-17, which is the latest benchmarking exercise available. As you'll see, some of those indicators are collected quarterly, some are collected 6 monthly, and some are collected annually, so it's the latest position we have available at the time the report was written. Obviously, this report is supplementary to a range of performance information you receive as Select Committee on your current work programme or may request in future as part of your work programme. So please use this to inform that. And the structure and content of future reports will be informed by the developing corporate plan. So future reports I present to you may be are likely to be in more depth and more detail, covering a range of areas. So that sort of gives you the background and an update in terms of the information covered. I'm happy to take any questions that members may have on the performance so far. If there's any points of detail for services that are not represented in the room, we may need to take those back and get those detailed responses back to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Councillor Davis.
You remember my name then, that was good. Good morning, Richard. Before I talk about the actual statistics, if you recall, I think it might have been economy and development. I spoke, and others spoke as well, about the need to be able to access this information. Whether we actually need to have a training session or it's just a matter of you emailing us to tell us how we access this information, I think that's very important, because a lot of information which I saw previously has disappeared, and to be honest, I've got no idea how to access it. So if you could do that to us all, I think that would be an advantage. I mean, the obvious, very concerning statistic on here is the level of staff absence. And if I'm reading this correctly, we are the lowest performing council within Wales. What that is in proportion to the others, I don't know. But we have previously scrutinised absence and the systems that are in place, and I think it's fair to say that this committee was not very impressed with what we were presented with, and we felt that there was other things needed to be done here. So I would suggest, Madam Chairman, that we need to have another session with the people concerned, because this, for any organisation, these are really concerning statistics, and we really need to look at what is being done or what needs to be done to address this issue. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you again for raising the point about access information. I know we did discuss it at the last Economy and Development Select Committee where it presented, and I certainly will provide members with an email with some links to those key information. And as I set out at Economy and Development, we are looking to do some further developments in terms of how members can access information, and also information available on council performance to the public as well imminently. So as those develop, we will update and circulate the updates on those, but we're certainly send the links on what's available at the moment. The second point around sickness, the benchmarking quartile there is from 2016-17. It shows in the bottom quartile. I don't think we were quite the worst performing council in Wales, but the point still stands that we were in the bottom quartile, an 11.5 days loss on average across the council. It is relatively high in comparison. What we've seen in terms of the update gives you in terms of 2017-18 performance based on sickness data from across the council between April and September. We're projecting that rate at the moment would decrease to the 9.2 days if that was taken for the whole year, so from April to March. However, you'll see from the comments there's some context there around the rates likely to increase during the winter months. So it's not expected to stay as low as 9.2 days. And also with some further information coming in around timeliness of reporting, that may increase. I know, as you rightly mentioned, People Services have presented to you their annual report. I know that health and well-being of the staff is one of their priorities, and the work they're doing at the moment around attendance training and support to managers. They're particularly looking at better use of data. Obviously, the indicator you've got in front of you just covers the whole authority. Sitting underneath that is a range of service direct level data, categories of data, short, long-term, categories in terms of types of sickness that they are analysing and working with managers to better understand where there may be issues, and importantly then what solutions and support to employees can be offered. And I know they've presented that to you as part of their report. So that's sort of the context I can give you in terms of where the current performance sits and what is projected to be at the end of this year. And as you mentioned, they maybe want to do further work with People Services on that.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Davis. And I think really there's a feeling in this committee that doesn't go far enough, and that we really want to see evidence of what progress has been made in this really area which is of great concern to us. So with members' support, I will be writing to Tracy Harry, the head of People Services, and inviting her back to this committee to present, because I know that when she presented her report last time, we really weren't satisfied with it. And I think now it would be prudent that she came back as a matter of urgency to present her evidence in what's happened since our last meeting with her and what progress has been made. Is everybody happy with Councillor Webb?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Richard, for coming this morning and for your report. Do you have a time scale? Is this time bound? Do you know when you're going to be able to come back, or when you'll be able to talk to Tracy? I'm a great believer that we do need a sort of a rough time scale, please. The other thing is, you with members of staff on long-term sickness, are they actually physically visited every 6 months or sooner than that? To me, it's a long time, 6 months, if you're not very well. And also the care up to that period. Do we get in touch? Do we write letters? How do we deal with that? Because I know in some situations, members of staff contacting members of staff are so concerned about the way they word things in this day and age and what exactly happens. I'd be pleased to know that. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. If you'd like to respond.
obviously important points here around sort of long-term sickness. I think it'd be best if I refer that to people services to answer to give you greater clarity than I could provide today around, and that support to employees. In terms of timescales, sure, right into Tracy and understanding what the committee can fit on their work programme and how urgent you want that to be. In terms of the data point of view, obviously in terms of the evidence of impact, we certainly have some Q3 data available. This is based on Q2, so that may help you. And obviously then moving on to the end of the year, there'll be a even more in-depth analysis undertaken, so that would be around July, August time, but that may not be soon enough for your work in terms of understanding certainly the actions that have been taken. But I think with sickness, in terms of the evidence of impact, sometimes that will take slightly longer to become clearer in the data, albeit I understand you'll want those assurances around the actions that are being taken now and the sort of immediate impact of those. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that sometimes the shifts can take longer to implement, but this has been an ongoing programme for a while, so we would expect to see some changes. So I can't be exactly clear, but I know there'll be those couple of key points that they'll be working towards.
Thank you. If I could take Councillor Easton and then Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this matter has been discussed in Audit Committee as well. It is a worrying trend, and the trend really was a lot to do with stress in the workplace, stress of the person. How do you correlate flexible working from home with sickness? How do the two come together? Is flexible working and working from home hiding a problem, or do you tease out the actualities of the statistics when people are on sick when they're at home, or when they're on sick when they're on flexible working? How does it all fit into your matrix?
Can I just interject there, because I feel that these questions, as valuable as they are, really are questions for Tracy when she comes to the committee, and I don't feel probably Richard, are you happy to respond, or would you rather this question was answered by the head of...
Question. I think it's probably something better to answer it for Tracy in terms of I deal with the higher level.
Yeah, so I think that it's been if we invite Tracy Harry back to our next meeting is very full, but the meeting after that around Easter time, and that will have been 9 months since we had that initial report, and I think that is enough time really for us to have seen some progress. So are you councillors happy with that? Councillor Smith.
Mine's a simple one. What's the standard holiday entitlement? Is there a standard holiday entitlement to staff within Monmouth? I appreciate that sort of different grades, but is there a standard one? Because somewhere in a report I've read 30 days. Is that the standard?
I think people can purchase additional holiday. There's a huge advert in the ladies' toilet, which, if people want to take a bit of a break and a longer, am I correct in saying that people can purchase additional holiday?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
And
Do you want
the annual leave entitlement, as far as I'm aware, certainly for me, is dependent on your level of service. So that increases with the length of service. So with your length of service, that increases. So I think is it 5 years, 7 years, something like that.
We're just debating that ourselves, Madam Chair. We think it kicks off at 22 and then goes up to 27. And possibly 30.
And then to 30.
HR will fill you in.
Yeah.
There are...
Thank you, and I think these questions are very valid when Tracy comes. I mean, I'd like to know if it's possible for people to take a career break, that type of thing, which is what a lot of people like to do these days. So we can keep all those questions for Tracy's visit to the committee. Thank you. So are there any other further questions? Councillor Roden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I notice that you have a section in here about the percentage of A roads in poor condition, and it states that you couldn't survey a large part of the network due to maintenance work. I'd be quite interested to know how maintenance work affects survey, and secondly, will you be increasing the amount surveyed in the future? Thank you.
Thank you.
So the surveys are undertaken by external contractors, and where possible they try and coordinate those so that the road is open for them to survey. The performance indicator sets out the proportion of roads that need to be surveyed in one given year. And that's not always 100% of all the network in 1 year. That can be built up over a number of years so long as a certain criteria is met. And obviously, where possible, if things aren't surveyed suitably in 1 year, they will look to then subsequently survey that piece of the network in the subsequent year or years, depending on which type of road it is. So, for example, C roads cover the network over a period, I think, 4 years. And the A roads is more of over a two-year period, those surveys undertaken. So I know colleagues in highways who deal with those in particular will work with the survey contractors to make sure that suitable coverage is undertaken in line with the guidance that sits behind these performance indicators.
Thank you, Richard. Roger, would you like to add to that?
If Councillor Roden's satisfied with that response, then we'll leave it at that, Madam Chairman, if that's okay.
All right, thank you very much. That's fine.
Are you happy, Councillor Roden? Thank you for your question. Are there any other questions on agenda item number 6? Sorry?
You do have a top there. Now recycling, so that's a good one.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So thank you very much, members. And I think we'll now move on to agenda item number 7, which is the seasonal garden waste collection item, which was substituted for the other paper that will now come to our next meeting, which was on social justice. And that particular paper wasn't quite ready, so we've brought the seasonal garden waste collection item instead. So if I could ask who's presenting.
If I may, Madam Chairman, I'll briefly open it up, and then, but I'll ask Carl to expand upon the service and the detail of what we're proposing. Initially, I thank Madam Chairman and members for taking this at short notice, because I know you have received it at short notice, and perhaps I should put it in context, really. The reason we brought it to you at this time may become more apparent when we actually get on to the next agenda item, which is about budget scrutiny. Because it's fair to say that part of this issue is about reducing costs for service with the minimum impact upon service. The reason we brought it to you now, prior to following the full budget approval, is in order that if members do agree to this proposal, that we can advise our customers in plenty of time for the new financial year. We correspond with each individual customer and new customers, and we'd like to be able to lay out what level of service we are providing. To do that, we need to be able to be in front of the main budget setting process. So I'm grateful for members for considering it, and but I thought it was useful to place it in context, if that's okay.
And okay, is Carl, are you adding to this at this present time?
As councillors ask questions.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So, Councillor Jones.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I thought it was quite a well thought out way of saving money. I thought it was very clever. So it was a comment rather than a question. Thank you.
Councillor Easton and then Councillor Smith.
Okay, thank you once again, Madam Chair. We've discussed this at many committees over a number of years, and we've seen the development of the what I think is an excellent service. I support the direction you're taking on this, because period between December, January, February tend to be the quiet times. But for us to sell this to the public, you're suggesting that you retain a frozen figure for the next year. For us to sell this to the public, I'd like to see 2 years of frozen prices, because this is either a 25% increase or a 25% reduction, whichever way you look at it. So if we could sell this to the public, I would support the view that a frozen price of 18 quid for 2 years might be a feasible option from my perspective. Other than that, the end of November is to me the better time, because I find that I'm running out of need to put out stuff out after November. Anytime before November, I think it might cause a few problems for a few people. So November, December, January, February, maybe, in my mind, are 3 months. You suggested December to March, which suggests to me it's the same time I'm thinking about.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Would you like to respond to Councillor Easton? I think it's a question concerning the months, isn't it, Councillor Easton?
I think we have. I'll leave you Carl to answer the actual months we put forward.
The proposal is for December to March. What we would look to do is advertise the dates each year. We won't stop a service halfway through a week. So if December the 1st falls on a Thursday, we'll do December the 2nd, and the same way in March. So we'll advertise when we go out to the public what the date is that year, that we'll stop the service and restart the service the following year.
If I may say, Madam Chairman, Councillor Easton's suggestion to be frozen over 2 years can form part of the feedback in the decision-making process around this. If members are indeed content to support this, I would anticipate going for a single-member decision. This isn't necessarily a policy. This is a discretionary service which we provide to residents. So it's not an authority-wide policy necessarily. So we'd follow that route. And then a further freeze in the following year can form part of your budget proposals in that following year. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Did you want to come back on that at all, Councillor Easton? Are there any other comments anybody would like to make? Councillor Smith.
Myself too. Are we covering all costs with the 1845 proposed?
The proposal was in here is to contain it at £18, provide a 9-month service. We're not covering all the cost. There is a shortfall. What we can't do is accurately say how many people will drop out of the service. So if we have less people dropping out of the service, we will be closer to covering all of our costs. If more people drop out because of the 3-month suspension of the service, there may be some more difference in it, but until we do it, it's very difficult to accurately say. We are as close as we can possibly get.
So, am I misreading? Because it's saying here the fees and charges were 1845. That's fine.
Madam Chairman, if I could perhaps elaborate upon that. When the budget proposals are put together, and we might refer to it in the next item, there are certain assumptions made in relation to your fees and charges, and that is that the fallback for all fees and charges is an assumption of increase of 2.5% on all charges. That's built in. In this instance, that would take it from, and following that, and a decision to that case would be for a rise from £18 to £18.45. What we're suggesting is that we don't follow that budget plan in this instance, and that we actually freeze it at £18, which is the charge as for this year. So that will mean there's a slight reduction in income, but it has to be balanced against this is a discretionary service. It's down to the customer to take it up. So it's a balance between the two.
So, being very hard, it's a discretionary service. We are strapped for cash in this council. We should be ensuring that we cover the costs of this discretionary service. And we've got to face reality, Chairman. It's very nice to sort of trim a little bit here and a little bit there. Did it yesterday. I really, as a member, feel discretionary service, very hard times, therefore should be covering full costs. I'm not happy with, well, I don't think I could be supporting Councillor Easton's proposal that we keep it low, because somebody then living in that top floor flat is collecting my green rubbish for me, and I don't think that's correct. So I am sorry that we need to face reality in this council. And until we do, we'll never balance our books.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Councillor Smith. And I personally would like to add that, we have got to remember that not everybody has a garden, which is, and this is really a service that is a luxury. It's a very good service by all accounts. The only thing that I would like to mention is that I'm having to deal with a case of fly tipping this week of green waste, which has actually blocked a road in my ward. And I would just like to to ask. I mean, the council has new powers now concerning fly tipping. Do you think that we need to sort of, it's another issue, I know, but during these months when we're not going to be collecting green waste, do you think there may be an increase in people tipping waste?
Yeah, I think for Councillor Smith, the difference in what we're anticipating is £9,900 subsidy, effectively. That's if 500 more customers stay on with us, that's that subsidy wiped out. So we are reasonably comfortable. Yes. So, but it's that small amount. You know, I'm not saying £10,000 is a small amount of money, but in the scale of what we're talking, it's a relatively small amount of customers to make that equal. I think from a fly tipping perspective, we've checked with colleagues in Newport and Torvine. They haven't seen any increase when they stop their collections during the winter period in fly tipping, or any increase in increased traffic within the CA site, HWRC. So we're reasonably comfortable that when we get to that point of year, December, we are going to see reduced green waste anyway, and the people would be relatively happy taking it to the CA sites.
Thank you very much, Carl. So if I can take Councillor Webb and then Councillor Davis.
You've sort of answered my question, Carl, that I was going to put, Chairman. Thank you. I was just wondering about the Vale, who are rural like we are, and if when their green waste is collected, if they're doing a similar thing or in a situation there, and if they've had any problems. But perhaps you can answer that outside the meeting, perhaps.
Right. Can you answer that now, please?
Yeah. We've obviously gone to our neighbouring authorities to see what they're doing, because I know that they don't collect during them times. We've checked across the board in Wales at a higher level, and most people are going to a seasonal type collection. So I'll check with the other the most similar counties to us, demographics and geography, and see if they're having any additional issues. But none has been reported to us.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to say this, as a user of this service, it's an excellent service. And I have no issue with what you're proposing. I think it's sensible. You know, I've got a brown bag in my garden, which has got a little bit in it and has been there for quite a few weeks. And I don't think it will significantly affect the number of people that use the service. What I think would significantly affect the number of people that use the service is if you put it up to £20 odd. And that you may well then see an increase in fly tipping, because I think people are willing to pay this at this level, but maybe if it goes a little bit higher, they won't be willing to pay it. And I think Councillor Eason's suggestion about, you know, perhaps freezing it for 2 years would encourage people to stay with the system and not to revert to tipping their waste on the roads and in other places. So you have my full support, and I think we ought to take that to whoever cabinet member is going to make this decision, Roger, and say that, you know, we need to freeze it for 2 years and encourage people to stay with the system. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could come back to Councillor Easton, but can I just ask members, can we just have some feedback from other members about how they feel? I mean, obviously, Councillor Smith has made her point about freezing the cost. What do other members feel about this? And then I'll take Councillor Easton after that. Councillor Roden.
I think that providing the service is restricted in the December, January and February period, I think most people would accept it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roden. And Councillor Dimmock, have you got any thoughts on this at all?
I'm happy with it. I think it's a good idea.
And how do you feel about this freezing of the price?
Yeah, I'm happy with that too. I think people will be happy. My residents will be happy anyway.
Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you. A bit difference with Councillor Smith on the basis that I'm making an assumption now that we're losing money on its concessionary service at the moment. If we're not losing money on a concessionary service, logically, we'd be making money in the next financial year if we're charging the same price for 9 months, because I noticed we're saving £70,000 really on employment costs of agency drivers and things like that. The financial figures to me suggest that we could contain this within the period that I suggested without losing money, which I support Councillor Smith's view that it should be self-financing, but I think on the basis of the figures I see that it's a bit difficult to bring the two together over a 2-year period to see exactly what we're saving.
Roger.
If I may, Madam Chairman. The figures there are the forecast which members can see under the resource implications title, but they are a forecast, they are an estimate. It depends upon customer take-up. If it drops off, then it doesn't fund itself. If indeed some people take it up, or existing ones decide they now want 3 bags rather than 2, then it will alter it again. As it stands, it's about break even. I think the point made by Councillor Smith about the service being self-funded is well made, and that it is a matter which we will have to review annually as to whether or not this service is funding itself, and if not, what action should we be taking, whether that's an increase in cost or whether it's a further alteration to the service, we don't know. But it's a point well made, because the authority's financial position is difficult, so a service such as this, discretionary, needs to be funding itself at least. And that's something which we will look at. I think just a little bit of background to it. Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had quite an increase last year in charge, and we saw the number of actual bags drop. So whilst your income per bag went up, your income overall remained about the same. Because some people were saying, well, I'll manage with 1 rather than 2, or I'll have 2 rather than 3. So it altered that. But eventually the service will become familiar with people and become confident with it again, and that should come through. So we will keep an eye on it, because the point is well made.
Thank you, Roger. Councillor Easton, have you got... No, I think that's the direction. Okay. Well, I think we've debated this thoroughly, and thank you very much for your contributions. Obviously, it's very important because it does affect our community. Can I just take a broad? Can I have a sort of broad show, just a show of hands as to whether people agree? Sorry.
I just wanted to second Councillor Davis's proposal.
Yes. Can you? That is that it is frozen for 2 years.
Based on the fact that you do it for a year, and the second year becomes a budget consideration.
Can you remember to use your microphones, please? And if everybody could take their name boards next time as well. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to forget somebody's name. That is the proposal which has been seconded by Councillor Webb. Can I just see who's in favour of that proposal?
I'd like to see us saying 1 year to try
Yeah.
and grasping.
Well, it's 2 years as it stands.
Well, Chair, Roger Hogg has made it clear that this year would be a positive, but next year it would be looked at as part of the budget process to freeze it for another year. That's what you said, wasn't it? Which really goes the way we need to go.
Okay, so just to confirm, that's a proposal. Can I take a show of hands on those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much, members. So we now We'll obviously feed that very important information back to the Cabinet member, and thank you very much for your contributions. So we're now moving on to... Pardon? Yeah. So if I could ask Dave Loader and Jonathan Davis to present the next item, which is the budget scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. You'll be pleased to know I'm not intending to go through all 170 pages of this report in detail this morning. I'll try and keep it at a summary level for you all and take your questions afterwards. Members will have seen the majority of this report already as part of the budget proposals taken to the November Special Cabinet on the 22nd of November. That report highlighted that there was still a budget gap for 2018-19 of £482,000. Cabinet agreed at that meeting to include in the planning assumptions for next year's budget an additional 1% increase in council tax, and also the removal of 2 disinvestments proposed, which were the parking charges for blue badges and the charging for breakfast clubs. The summary position following those changes is shown in paragraph 3.35 of this report, which I think is page 38 of your pack, reducing the budget gap then down to £243,000 for 2018-19. Following that, on the 20th of December, Welsh Government communicated their final budget settlement for Monmouthshire, the effect of which overall was was £69,000 better off than their provisional settlement offer earlier in the year. If you take that into account, then the budget gap at the moment currently stands, as we're modelling it, at around £174,000. It is important to highlight, though, that yesterday the Month 7 Revenue Monitoring Report was taken to Cabinet. It highlighted significant recurring budget pressures. These have the potential to further impact next year's budget, along with the impact from the proposed pay award. Currently, an officer group is working on bringing forward further budget proposals to address any shortfall that may arise from these recurrent pressures. Arrangements are also being put in place to ensure that there'll be further scrutiny of any new proposals prior to the final budget being considered by Cabinet and the final council tax resolution being agreed by Council in March. On the capital side, page 177 contains the capital budget proposals, which again were taken to November Cabinet. The report itself explains the context in which the proposals have been developed. Cabinet decided at that meeting in November to include the provision of an additional £300,000 for disabled facilities grants, in addition to their traditional budget of £600,000. The Welsh Government final settlement in December included no change to the capital funding offer. So on that basis, I'll just go back to the recommendations for these 2 reports, which are on pages 29 and 177, and that it's for this select committee to consider and provide feedback on the budget assumptions, pressures and savings pro formas affecting this select portfolio area. On the capital side, it's to consider and provide feedback upon the capital budget assumptions and priorities also affecting this select portfolio area. So, Chair, I'm happy that Dave and I will take any questions on this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And obviously you've clearly outlined what our job as a committee is in regarding this. I know that some members have already covered this on other committees. So who would like to speak first any questions for Jonathan and Dave on these proposals? Councillor Eason?
You've made an assumption within your projection is that there will be a 4.95% increase in precept or rates across the county. There was a slight positive contribution from the Welsh Government, not what we'd like, I know. How will that, in your view, affect the presumption or the assumption, which is the right word, I don't know, on the rate increase of 4.95? We haven't gone that far previously, and I'm suggesting they may well not go that far this year. So you made an assumption on 4.95. And equally, how does that affect, I asked the question yesterday, we didn't quite get the right answer, I got the answer I was seeking, was how would the overall precept affect residents of Monmouthshire should the police precept be increased above, let's say, an inflationary level? Does that fit into your thoughts?
Yeah, in terms of the Cabinet decision in November to factor in another 1%, taking the council tax rise up to 4.95. The final settlement in December, as I alluded to, had the impact of making it, I think, £69,000 better off. Obviously, the bottom line, there is still a budget gap, so at this stage, we'll continue with Cabinet's decision that we model 4.95, and the consultation period through to the end of January will take those comments into consideration in terms of bringing the final proposals back to Cabinet in March.
And could I bring another further question on that? How do you determine, or how do local councils, community councils determine their precept on the basis of advice from yourselves? Or do you leave them purely at their own devices? Because there's been an encouragement in the past to take some services at local level, which then would automatically, I think maybe the wrong word, might increase the local precept, which in effect is supporting the council tax at a level which could be higher if we weren't taking on these services, like toilets and things like that, which I know is going to come up before, I think it's before our committee later on. How do you guide community councils? Just leave them on their own, or do they seek advice? Because I see that smaller community councils don't have the ability to raise a great amount of precept, take on some of the extra responsibilities which need to be taken on by those communities.
Are you going to answer that, Roger? Yeah. Thank you. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Eason? Councillor Webb.
This is one of my bones of contention. Community and town councils aren't capped. If there's a particular project which they need to put forward, they can have a public meeting and they can precept for what they require. This is so important in this day and age. We have met the rainy day, and it's time that community councils and town councils actually matched up to this position and actually precepted if for any big project which we are unable to look at, that they can precept for this, because as I say, we are capped, but town and community councils aren't capped.
Thank you for that contribution. Would you like to come back at anybody? It's more of a comment than a question, I think, but thank you. Councillor, yes.
Generally, Madam Chairman, over quite a few years now, we've been trying to work much closer with town and community councils, and I'd have to say with a great deal of success. And many services which were otherwise at jeopardy are still retained to the public because of that working relationship which we have fostered between the county and the various local councils.
That's good to hear. So if I could take Councillor Smith and then Councillor Davis.
It would be useful to actually able to quote some examples to other community councils that are a little reluctant. I was actually thanked by a community councillor after a meeting for getting quite irritable and proclaimed there is no money. Monmouthshire County Council is perceived as rolling in money. You cannot we need to get the message over clearly and simply that what the state of play actually is, but to be thanked for actually getting irritable and saying there is no money, and somebody saying, I'm glad you've said that. There is another thinking within that small community. But to have examples of what other communities have actually achieved by sharing responsibility would be good. But I think also if we could put together a very simple fact sheet as to the fact that over the last, 4 years, we've saved approximately £20 million, and we only have X million in any case to play with, and if you don't contribute towards it, you're not going to get it, and it is not double paying, because that's what it's perceived as with some councils, that if they contribute, they're going to be paying twice for something which they wouldn't get actually. But no, I'd like some examples because I've worked hard on that and got nowhere.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Did you want to respond?
And we have over the years provided various pieces of information to try and encourage this, but if members feel that it's worth pursuing further, then obviously we can take that on again and try and encourage local councils to take on a broader role where we're struggling to provide, I think.
It needs to be really concise, half a piece of paper which we can understand.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could take Councillor Davis, then Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In relation to the issue that's just been raised about local councils, my personal opinion, and has been for some time, that local councils could and should be taking on a lot more responsibility. But there's a lot more to it than making that statement, because the local councils haven't got the professional backup that an organisation of this size has got. And there's a whole debate about the number of local councils there are, their responsibilities and the amount of budget that they have as well. I think there's 800 and something local councils in Wales, so there's a whole debate to be had around that. But I think, my personal view is that if the system was reorganised, then there's the potential there for these local organisations to take on a lot more responsibility for a lot more things than they currently do. That wasn't what I was going to talk about, but what I was going to talk about was the shortfall. It's not a question for you, it's about the shortfall in the budget. We have, in Economy and Development, made proposals about potential savings on procurement that could be made within this organisation. And those of us, including yourself, Madam Chair, who've worked in private enterprise, will know that there are always constant pressures as far as finances are concerned, and you're constantly looking for ways to generate more income. Now, the potential with procurement, I think we spend £90-odd million on procurement in this organisation. If we save 2.5% of that, we would actually generate £2.25 million for this organisation. So there are workshops and various things going on, and that has been taken up by the senior officers in the council. But I really must emphasise that if this was a private industry, we would be latching onto that and looking at doing that as soon as possible. What we can't afford to do is debate it endlessly and end up still talking about it next year. We need to put the people in position and make the decisions that will allow those benefits to be seen by the people in this council and by the residents out there as soon as possible. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis, for those points. Very well made. Jonathan, did you want to come back and just give us a recap on actually what is going on within the council as far as procurement is concerned currently? Just for the benefit of people that are watching this, especially on live streaming, member.
So, yeah, perhaps I can offer a comment on that, Madam Chairman, and around the process overall. John's already mentioned, but just to re-emphasise that you will be receiving a further report in setting the budget. Since this draft budget has been put together, there are extra pressures which have come to light in relation to social care, education and transport. Those have to be built into the model before you ultimately set your budget. And it also includes a pay increase over and above that which we'd anticipated. So we will have to factor that in a way, and that's a significant pressure which hasn't been taken into account. So those will be built into further proposals to come forward to yourselves and ultimately to council to set your budget. At the moment, there are officers who are working on various strands. Councillor David's already mentioned it. Procurement is one of those. There are others around the transport, around commercial services. We've already talked about one today. We need to look at those again in more detail. There is a significant amount of work being undertaken at the moment to come up with options to place before you as a council to set your budget in 18-19. So this was a draft at that time. There is more work to be done particularly because of those pressures which were unknown at the time this first one was put together, but are now quite clearly there. And that will come to you. But yes, procurement, it's point well made. There is it is about, I believe it's about 90 million in terms of contracted, whether that's capital and revenue or just revenue, I'm not 100% sure, but they are both there. And we will be looking at that in some detail along with various other items which will come over and above the proposals which are in here. Or actually, I'd have to say even some of the proposals which you are looking at in this draft are already being amended. One of the reasons we came back to you to look at 9 months, we probably have done that in the following year because it's quite obvious to you we're pushing this through a little bit, aren't we? We're trying to get this through because we've seen a couple of proposals which we put into this draft are not going to be delivered. One of which was the reduction on grass cutting from 16 cuts to 14 or 14 to 12. I can't remember which way it could be 16 to 12. But that required us working with MHA to do that because their plots sit alongside our plots. It wouldn't look very good if you got one this long and one that long. MHA aren't minded to move in that direction, so we can't deliver on that one. So we have to look at amendments to it already. And there's another one around a mini sweeper as well. And looking at the particular lease on that, we can't get out of that lease, so we can't deliver that one in this year. So this is very live at the moment. It is the high priority, I believe, for all officers. And we will be bringing back further amendments to it.
Thank you very much, Roger. And we're very fortunate, following our discussion, that the portfolio holder, Councillor Murphy, is available this morning. So I wondered if you could give this some additional context, please, Councillor Murphy. We'd be very grateful.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to. I think probably I'll need to pick up on any questions having missed out on the discussions so far. Forgive me if I'm repeating anything you've already been told, but the paper that you've got before you now is the consultation at as it was at the time that we were actually looking at the figures. There will be movement subsequently as a result of the additional pay award to staff, the size of our final settlement, and various other things that have cropped up since, which is currently making us review the situation.
I think it's inevitable that we will have to come back with some additional proposals, and that will be done at probably a joint seminar now, as it's so late in the day. Can I tell you what those are? No, and there is a very good reason for that, is because we don't know yet what decisions we're going to have to be putting forward. But as soon as we get to that stage, we'll be calling members together and say, look, this is the situation. You know what it was. This is the situation now, and this is what we're proposing to do about it. But it won't have the time to go round the ordinary scrutiny rounds. So we'll have a joint scrutiny meeting to discuss it. That situation was made clear to group leaders at Cabinet yesterday. You know, they're well aware of what that situation is.
Thank you very much for clarifying the position for members here. And I think if we just, can you just confirm once again, Jonathan, what that figure was, just for the increase in the pay award, what impact that has had on the council's budget? Was it 1.3 million, which has now obviously had a great impact on our plans for the budget?
Yeah, we're up to about 2.5 at the moment, Chair. Whether it'll stay at that remains to be seen, but that's where we are at the moment.
So obviously there are some very difficult negotiations and discussions ahead. Are there any questions for Councillor Murphy from any members? Councillor Eason?
Thank you, Chair, Madam Chair. It relates to part of the answer that Mr Hoggins gave around, in terms of devolution of services. Over the number of years, we've encouraged local community councils to take on certain services, devolution, but there's been some reticence within some communities to actually engage with Monmouthshire County Council and yourselves as a Cabinet. I know that my community council has, as Roger is aware, we've taken on quite a little bit in the area, but you've met with cluster meetings in the south of the county. There's been a reticence to do this. Is there any way you feel you can encourage, rather than discourage, community councils to come on board, particularly, say, Sevenside, where we try to get a cluster working, but it doesn't seem to want to get off the ground? What do you feel, Councillor Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Tony. And can I start off by echoing my thanks to Caldicott Town Council. They've been fantastic. There's no other way of describing it. The attitude there, the approach that they've made towards cluster working is really an example to everybody. Is there reticence? Yes. How do we bring them on board? I don't know. Roger has been trying for years. I've joined him with some, and I don't think we need to go into some of the responses we had, but they're very, very disappointing. Forgive me for saying what could be interpreted as, particularly as this is live streamed, as a glib answer. But I think the only way we're going to do it, and I'm saying this seriously, is when we take the service away. Because that could be the consequence of what we've just been talking about. I'm not saying it is, but it's one of those possibilities that might arise. They're then going to have to decide if they want to see it go, or whether they're going to step up to the plate and help us in continuing it. We've always made it absolutely clear that we will continue to provide a service if somebody pays us for it. If Welsh Government, through the settlement or our ability to raise charges through council tax or whatever, isn't sufficient to keep that service going, then the only fallback really is town and community councils, because they are able to increase their precept to protect that particular service if their community thinks that it's valuable enough to be saved. There's an awful lot of complication in amongst that lot, Chair. that was a very simplistic answer to what Tony Eason knows is a very difficult question. But I thank him for asking it, because he's absolutely spot on.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Murphy. And I'd like to bring in Councillor Webb, who made a similar point earlier today.
Thank you, Phil. I couldn't have agree more with you. I mean, town and community councils can do such exciting things, but they need the money. So they've got to precept for this. They have, if it's a huge project like a car park or an extension to something, a village hall or something, they have to have a public meeting for order the public to agree with this. They're not capped, so there's no end to what town and community councils can actually do, as they have done in Caldecott. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is obviously a golden opportunity to ask questions of the portfolio holder. Are there any members that haven't spoken that would like to ask Councillor Murphy a question? Did you want to sum up at all, Councillor Murphy, or are you... Thank you.
I think I probably summed up in my opening remarks, Chair. I just want to reiterate the fact that this budget round isn't over. I feel sorry for my colleagues in the front who thought they'd done all of their work, and they haven't. It's as straightforward as that. We've been dealt quite a massive blow. It wasn't totally unexpected. We did make some provision for it, but it's greater than we were anticipating, and we will have to react accordingly.
Thank you very much. And obviously we take on board everything that's been said, and we understand that there will be further workshops, etc., for us to attend before the budget meeting, which is now on March the 8th.
Well, yes, it could be. But with regards to March the 8th, could I make a plea to members that we really do need that extra week? Or extra, what was it, March? It says an extra week, isn't it? If we can't get the members there, we will manage for the first. But this is really a plea for the benefit of the officers who've got an inordinate amount of work to do. If we can make it the 8th, then please can everybody help us out.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much for coming along to address the committee today. So, sorry, Councillor Roden.
Thank you, Chair. With the pay inflation assumption changing, are there any other inflation indicators that are likely to change in the 3.11 section of the budget?
Thank you.
I'm quite curious as well about the fact that you've got non-pay inflation at zero. I'm just wondering how you're going to control that. Thank you.
Do you want me to come back on that, Chair? The inflation indicators there are the ones that were in our modelling. You'll note that we've already indicated that we would be looking at increasing the rate of the council tax increase for this year. That's subject to ratification by the council on, well, should we say the 8th of March. But that remains the working assumption there. With regards to central government funding, well, that did change. So we know about that change anyway. The other external income, where possible, we have increased our charges by either the market rate or 2.5%, whichever was the best for us. With regards to pay in inflation, that we know is now not 1%, so that's already been panned out. Non-pay inflation, it doesn't matter what it is, we are setting it as zero. So if departments find that their costs have increased, they have to manage that cost. The vacancy factor, well, the vacancy factor just in case some of the new members haven't quite picked up on it yet. But you put your budget in and you tell us what 100% of your requirement is. And we say, yeah, okay, no problem at all. Here's 98% of it. It's 97. Oh, on staffing, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Just to make that clear. Thanks, Rog. So managers have to manage it with that. Invariably, there will be staff vacancies as time goes on. Sometimes it helps out because it indicates where perhaps some savings in staff can take place. Although it's fair to say that that's getting less and less the case as time goes on. Superannuation, well, that's set by the external bodies that control the Torvine Pension Fund, and the school's budget is still considered to be staying at 0%. Although the intention, certainly up to now, has been that we at 0%, that it stays at 0%. We did in the past hold it at 0, but passed on additional costs. We're hoping this time that we won't have to do that, but as I said earlier, everything's back up in the air. But I will be discussing that with the Schools Budget Forum this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back on the response there, Councillor Roden, at all?
It was a comprehensive response and easy to understand. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So unless there's any other further questions, thank you very much for your contribution today, Councillor Murphy. It's greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
And what we're going to do now is to move to look at the Forward Work Programme and the Cabinet and Council Forward Work Programme, and then we'll come back to discuss the capital programme, which will be discussed in closed session. Do you think he should stay? Councillor Murphy, are you able at all to stay for just the next item, which is the capital? That would be. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Carl. Thank you, Roger. So if we can look at the Forward Work Programme, which is actually on page 229 for those of you following. So obviously at our next meeting on the 15th of February, we will be looking at the social justice policy, which has been moved from our meeting today. Is there anything else I need to mention on that, Hazel?
No, to be honest, Chair, as you can see, we've had to move the social justice policy to the next meeting, which will allow you a chance to have a proper discussion, because it's a new policy. It's very important, and we just didn't feel we should add it to today's busy agenda. The focus really needs to be on budgets, which you've successfully done. You need to be aware that we're calling a special meeting on Monday the 26th of February to look at civil parking enforcement and a consultation on the closure of Mitchell Troy toilets. So we don't feel that it's appropriate to put all that into the 15th of February meeting, because it's just not going to equal effective scrutiny. So please can members note the date of that meeting. And I think that's all to update at the moment, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's pity Roger's gone now, because the special meeting you're talking about with civil parking enforcement, that is going to come down to the local authority eventually, isn't it? I think it's very important that we all get full commitment on that.
Yes, I mean, Roger has left, but I think the questions on that should be posed perhaps on the day rather than now. So I wasn't perhaps intending to go into a discussion on those items, but I think they're two substantial items that you will probably be interested in, particularly the toilets at Mitchell Troy. That's something the committee's discussed before. I just think you need proper time to discuss these things rather than having one humongous meeting.
Yeah, but regarding civil enforcement of parking, I think it should be an all-member involvement, not just as we know about it, but I think that I was at a meeting on Monday beginning this, but I think all members should be briefed and allowed to get involved in that.
If members are happy, then we can invite all members to that select committee meeting. Some of you will be aware that there was a workshop on active travel plans, which was for all members, which Councillor Eason attended, and that was jointly with the Strategic Transport Group. That we felt should not be duplicated by then coming here. The point of the workshop was put on for everybody to attend and discuss that, and for it to be taken forward as a council decision. So you'll get another chance there to have a discussion. But that workshop was put on before Christmas for members on this week just gone.
But there were only 8 members there.
Well, I don't know what we can do to force people to attend meetings, Councillor Eason, but I think in terms of the scrutiny of the civil parking enforcement, you need proper time to do that. And if you're willing to invite all members to your meeting, we can extend that invitation. Again, we can't force everybody to come, but we can give plenty of notice now, and people can attend that, all members. Is that something the committee
Yeah,
would
certainly. I've had an indication that from the emails that I've received that there are members that are very interested in these topics. So with everybody's blessing, I would like, will invite all members to come along. How does everyone feel about that? Is everyone in agreement? Yeah. And obviously the other items that need to go onto our forward plan, as we've discussed today, is the item around funerals and cremations, which was a topic that was on our action plan from our last meeting, and also that we're going to invite the head of People Services back to update us on the situation concerning staff sickness.
Chairman, I'm sorry. Can I make my apology to the 26th? I have given them already. It's a fire authority meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Just for you to be aware, I mean, your next meeting will then be the 29th of March, so you're looking towards sort of Easter time then, and you've got quite a full agenda there. You've got the waste policies, you've got the air quality management. That's a big topical issue at the moment. Heavy goods on country lanes. We wouldn't be bringing you a policy at that meeting, but we'd be wanting to discuss with you the implications of developing a policy on that. So that's going to be a very discursive topic. You've also got the strategic equality plan. If you choose to look at sickness absence as well, and you want to look at cremations and burials, I'm just flagging up to you, if you want to do all this, you're going to need some extra meetings. Okay.
I think we'll need to have a closer look and a further discussion and update members on how we're going to tackle it. But we are very mindful that all those topics need covering.
Implications of sorting out the absence, right? There are huge financial benefits, and it is very, very important that it's kept high on the agenda so that people know you're concerned.
Yes, I think it must be a top priority, and we're already 9 months down the line, and how much damage has been done in that time. We can't afford for it to continue. So we'll obviously update members. Hazel and I will meet, and we'll work out how we're actually going to tackle it in the timescale.
It looks like you'll probably need a special meeting perhaps to do those two topics, sickness absence and cremations and burials, and I would suggest perhaps not deliberately combined, but in terms of timescales, if you're having a special meeting on the 26th of February and then you're not meeting till the 29th of March, you might want to put the special in between those times. Would that be okay? And are you happy for me to give that indication to officers that you have a meeting between the 26th of Feb and the 29th of March to look at those two? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. So unless there's any other contributions, I think we'll now move on to look at the Cabinet and Council Forward Work Programme. So if you could just bring us up to speed on that, please, Hazel.
It's there presented to you for information. Your role is to identify anything that you would like to see brought forward for scrutiny. As you know, you receive this every Friday, the weekly updates of things that have been added and deleted to the planner, so it's worth you all keeping an eye on that. But unless you flag anything up, it's there for you for your reference today.
7th of February, disposal of County Hall. It's the old one, I presume.
Yes, and that falls under the remit of Economy and Development Select Committee.
Are there any other questions concerning the Forward Work Programme or any contributions anybody would like to make? So I think if that being the case, we'll move on to the final item, which was number 10, and we'll be turning off the live streaming. And we are excluding the public and press. Has that all been